So I don't know about you, but I found this to be kind of a hard couple of days with this notion that we've experienced the 3 hottest days in current history. The record of human history, I guess. Probably not human history, but recorded history here. The hottest days, those disaster levels that we're having, disaster level things that are happening across just this country, but also India, and Pakistan. I got people up in upstate New York who are flooded, and people. I don't have people in Texas, but people in Texas are overwhelmed. The grid is I just have so I have to go look at my refrigerator when these things happen, because posted on my refrigerator is a saying that says action is the antidote to despair. And I think we just have to kind of move in and see what we can do about that. So oh, I hear the door open. So the agenda today is, as soon as Dana comes, she'll be part of the main part of the agenda, but even if she doesn't come, what we'll do is look at the work that she's done on the report, and see where we need to go next on it. She did an enormous amount of work today, which I actually haven't had a chance to look at all of. So, but she was going to lead us through that and sort of describe what she's done, what still needs to be done. And then Miriam was going to look at some of the index issues, appendices, and what are the issues around the appendices we need to look at.
Just have one appendix.
One appendix?
That's the one I was talking about.
Not
I
all of them?
didn't, well, I can think about all of them, but I was mostly, it was really the appendix that has the, all the data, the information from the survey.
Oh. Okay,
But I had some questions for everyone related to that.
okay. So if Dana doesn't show up, we'll do that first. Oh, there she is. Yeah, okay. So that's the agenda, and are there any objections to?
You just want to call the meeting to order.
Is Brian here?
Brian, are you online? Available? Yeah.
I am here. Sorry, I'm eating my dinner so I don't gross everybody out.
Okay, we just want to know. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'm officially then calling the meeting to order. The July 11th meeting of the Climate Action Committee. So now we're going to adopt the agenda, which was Dana's going to walk us through some stuff, and then Miriam's going to walk us through some stuff, and then we're going to talk about our implementation stuff that we're doing, the outreach with the other cities, how it just took off. So is there any objection to the adoption of the agenda? Okay. We also have the May minutes to adopt. We didn't have quorum, so we didn't adopt the minutes. Are there any objections to the May minutes? Okay, I'll accept the May minutes. We of course did not have we had a meeting, but it wasn't official.
Let's see if there's citizen comment.
So that's why we don't have minutes for last month, but if you wanted to see what we did, you could look at the video. Okay, now we had citizen comments. Did you have?
No, but I'm just here to learn. I'm really fascinated.
Okay.
Sounds good.
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah. Are there other people online? Okay. So
I'm a citizen who's interested. Everyone's interested. You're just the only one that showed up today. Yeah. We need the most.
yes, the most interested citizen. We have a citizen here. And you're online, and
I stumbled.
yeah.
Do I have to be on Zoom to share?
Just share your screen.
Yes.
sorry.
And just
Do you have the back?
make sure you just mute that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, so Jane's gonna share the screen and walk us through the work she's done and tell us what else we need to do. Oh, boy.
Okay.
We're waiting. Is there, does anybody have the link to the current plan? That is to say, it's a Google document
Yeah.
still, right? Okay, yeah.
Oh, yes, I should send that.
Okay, I'm trying to find it, but, oh, you did. Okay.
Oh, did you give it to
Yesterday,
Cory?
in Sarah's commit.
Oh,
This is the working draft one that we've been.
I think so. Is that what Tracy's referring to?
Yes,
Okay. And that got sent out.
Yeah, it's sent
Yes,
yesterday,
yeah.
Sarah and I sent it yesterday, I think Sarah sent it. The Zoom link, you can go through the agenda or the meeting, email went out like an hour
You sent an email in.
for the Zoom link.
I can send it by chat, but I don't have a chat function on my thing. Does anybody else have a chat function?
Then just
I'll
I'll resend it out.
I have gotten.
Yeah, I think with the city stuff, there's no chat function.
you wanna use my computer? I have it up.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's it.
And I can send you.
Oh, either way. Yeah, it might be easier.
I'm just emailing it to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Why did I not get these photos?
So let me just talk a little bit about what we're doing, is change the agenda around and talk about what we can, we're finding in your document. We have scheduled a week from today in the Commons, there'll be a educational piece on gas stoves. And Dr. Mark Vossler from Physicians for Social Responsibility is going to talk about the health impacts of gas stoves. And then Gary Hockey, who some of you know, is bringing in a 2-burner induction stove. So people can just see what it is. You know, that notion of touching it and then it's cool and boiling water so fast. He was going to make pasta, but he couldn't figure out how to drain the water. So I suggested pancakes, but I don't know, he's going to try some. We're going to have some handouts that talk about the rebates specifically for gas stoves and for electrical panels, so that people have that information. And then we're developing a little, Cory and I are working on a little evaluation. It's very quick. It just says, what'd you learn, or you know, it's what did you like, what kind of improvements, and then what other things would you like to have educational pieces on. So we get some feedback from the people who are most interested in doing that. We've sent out notices. Brian got it posted in the Stewardship Foundation newsletter. I sent a document out today to the condos and the apartments that had a process for getting it out to their residents. The Sheridan Beach Club group and Shoreline Area News should be out the next day or two. But it's really, if you and the Democrats said they would take it, post it. If you know any group that you should pass this on to them. The city's doing some work on the social media, and Shoreline is doing some, and Kenmore, but we're really like,
Is the Rotary meeting tomorrow morning?
yes.
That might be a good group. Yeah.
Yes, Linda usually does that. I asked them to do that. I'll check. And Tamara has been doing some social media posting on school groups and Lake Forest Park for action. Did you find it?
I'm just challenged, but yes, I'm getting there.
Okay,
Keep going.
this is okay, right? We're doing the last
Yeah.
round meeting first. So I hope you'll all come. That's the other piece.
It's like, I kind of got it, right?
Yes, Tracy's gonna be the MC.
Right.
But, you know, it's the, you have a party and you send out a big invitation and nobody RSVP, so you don't know if anybody's coming.
Right.
That's where we are with this particular thing. I don't think we're gonna set up 60 chairs and see what happens. There'll be more chairs if we need them, and we'll take them out. There are only 6 of us. Yay, we see you, Dana. That's a step in the right
I
direction.
went through the atmosphere on the way over here. Okay, so
Just make sure your microphone.
Right,
is
it's off,
muted,
yeah.
I have it.
And Zoom and your, there you go, you should be good.
I haven't done Zoom.
Okay, we're gonna keep working while she gets it.
There you go.
So Sarah, what time is that?
It's at 7 o'clock at night. If you can come early at 6:30, just to fill the room so that we don't have social anxiety about not having the room filled, that'd be good. We can get cookies, what? Tuesday, a week from today. And
Give away cookies, that we said.
no, but we could individually get cookies. No, could we get cookies?
Maybe, I
Maybe.
mean, right, we could support the bakery.
Yeah, that's right.
Get close up there. Oh, just while I was up there, because I had to eat, so I put where to eat. I was telling people to get me a cookie on their way out. I looked over his clothes.
Oh,
We have to ask them to stay open.
stay in advance.
But maybe they'll stay open because there's an event.
Or
but
just-
There's nobody there. when I was there.
Or just basically get them in advance, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're just cookies, so.
Okay. Oh, Dana's still there. Okay, how about the
Can
conference?
I just go on one? I can't figure out how I'm going to share my screen because I guess I haven't done Zoom for so long. Am I stealing this away from you?
No, I'm gonna write notes to my,
Yes.
And
What is
while
your
we're,
thing?
while we're waiting, Tamara, thank you for putting out that notice about us being at the farmer's market on, I believe it's next Sunday, right?
28.
Oh,
You're
2
not-
Sundays from now,
not sure.
okay.
Oh, maybe not.
The
23rd.
23rd.
Okay, 23rd, okay.
Mhm.
All right, and so please, people sign up because I think the noon hour is still uncovered.
Yeah, I think Tamara's gonna give a report.
Oh. Sorry, didn't mean to steal your thunder.
Well, while this is going on.
You want to share this?
You know, you'd think we'd be really good at this, right?
But you'd be wrong.
We'd be wrong.
Yeah.
Makes me feel your humor.
We are indeed.
I don't even know if I'm human. Would be better at this if I were. Okay. What do I have to say about this? There is a new working draft Google Doc, and I think Mimi also, and I have been, and Sarah have been furiously working away on this. I've seen all sorts of comments come through from you guys, so that's awesome. And now I'd like to, I would like to encourage others to take a look at this document, and maybe you're working through it on your own, or maybe you're working through it with me on Zoom, whichever way is good for you. I just wanted to walk through a little bit about what I did with this. So, can everyone see it okay? Okay. So I took a look at the climate action plans from other cities and started to get a big picture idea of what are our neighbors, what did they do, and how are we going to present what we have, because we have a ton of content now in here. How are we going to put it into a document that's going to be something that people are going to understand and get persuaded by and are going to want to read? So I have made a little bit of an adjustment to the index, which I can't seem to pull up here.
Yeah, I'm happy there.
Okay, so there is an index for this, which has all of these different headings. organized by index. And what I did was I kind of looked through our index and compared it with the index from especially Kenmore's plan, because Kenmore's, it's sort of easy to fit together organizationally with ours. Doesn't mean it's the best way to do it, and totally we can go other ways. There is the index, magic. So if you look through this, you'll kind of see, I think, a correlation between what we've got here and with what is in Kenmore's plan, kind of. And ours does have differences. So I've put together things that, you know, didn't fit in their organization into our own organization. We have things like vision and goals, which I think is really nice. I've made an opening notes section, which just kind of tells what our idea of what this document is, that it's a living document, like updating it, and kind of the main overall point of this document as the opening thing. Then we do have these other sections up here that have not yet been written, but they're not the meat of the whole thing, really. And I think those will come at the end. We'll get the acknowledgements and the table of contents all together up in front there. I am kind of stuffing things into appendices at the back, and I do believe that Mimi is also working on appendix stuff. Okay, so that's the another big thing, is to pare down what we have in this document and put things that aren't, you know, immediately necessary for people to, the general people to read, into a reference section in the back where you get more of the more meat, if for people that are interested. So things are referred to throughout the content here. You know, more information is in the appendix. So I kept some of this stuff pretty similar to what we had before. We've got our visions and goals section. Actually, there's been a few additions, and so you might want to read through that. And this first section is really where I put my energy in. So this is the section that's sort of the background, the introduction of what a climate plan is and what we're going to do here generally, not the specific actions and targets and all of that stuff. That part I find harder to get my head around. Kenmore's got a big section with a table with all of the actions and implementations, all, you know, listed in a very just a very organized way. So we might want to get somebody, get a subgroup to work on that kind of thing and to figure out how we want to list out all of what we are suggesting that LFP city do.
Just to give you a background on that, they pulled that from the climate action tool from K4C.
Aha.
Yeah, that's why it looks so organized.
Yeah, so we want to think about whether we want to do that. But the nice thing about it is that it's really straightforward. It's just a list of these are the things that we are proposing that the city do. Maybe a quick why or whatever, how it fits in with other agendas.
So if we use the K4C model, would it come out in the chart?
I've not used it for that, but I'm sure there must be a way. Well, they went through several iterations,
Yeah.
so I'm not gonna claim anything
Okay.
from it. Okay.
Yeah, so we could. Are you on? No. If anybody else is on Zoom, you can pull up that, if somebody like Corey, if you wanted to pull up the Kenmore climate action plan, if we can zip to you for a few minutes. in a bit to look at that section if you want to compare it to what we've got. Okay, so, we've got a description of what the climate park or the climate park committee is. Who are we? What is our, just generally, why do we have a climate action committee? And then we have our introduction to explain sort of what is climate change very, very briefly, and how specifically climate change is predicted to impact Lake Forest Park, how it already has impacted Lake Forest Park. Again, this is kind of just content blotted out here, and I think there's probably better ways to make this more easily readable with figures and maybe tables or something, which is the way that these other cities have put together their climate action plans, so it's not quite as dense.
So just as a format thing, are we doing both inline citations and footnotes?
I don't know how, I don't use footnotes personally
Okay.
myself. I don't even know how to make them, but there are footnotes in here that were put in there by other people. I
Okay.
wanna delete those. I've deleted a lot of other stuff. But I kept those in. So
Just
we
wondering
can
what-
have them as-
Well, we'll create what do they call it?
Style guide.
Yeah, and so maybe that goes up here at the top with. References.
While you're up there, should we have, a lot of these plans have a definition, like a table of.
Right. It's the
Glossary.
glossary. Yeah. I don't know why it's indented, but.
So, well, because I was thinking it should go in the. I don't know, we can talk about.
So
that
a lot of
too.
them have it right up.
Right.
No,
First
I feel
thing,
like
all the
then
definitions.
you get all these
Just
definitions.
kind of really get by it, right,
Right.
initially until you need it.
I guess,
and you
yeah,
go back.
maybe that's the.
So I don't
case,
know
and that.
I don't.
Unless you could have somebody illustrate it, which would make it a little bit more accessible.
Some of them are super long, they've
Yeah.
got all these things in them, so that is another thing to
But that's
make.
that's the way legislation works, right? They begin with that, and so it's a model that.
That's why no congressperson reads.
Well, maybe there could be a link or like a active glossary where you could
Just click on.
roll over,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Tori will do that for us.
Weren't we gonna have to use some money to pay for somebody to help us?
Well,
with this?
that, I was thinking about that too. So if we do get like a draft of this, it does seem to me that we should have a more professional organization go through and say, this is not a good way to do this, or this is a good way, or you can put this kind of figure in, or whatever it is. I do think that that's a good.
I mean, they could format it, do all of the citations, do the links and run it.
And they may have even the graphic designer or two, right?
Yeah, and graphic design. So getting together all the content is a big thing, I think, that we're doing that other cities haven't done, and that will cut costs, I guess, for having professional.
We're gonna have a letter from there.
Yes.
Okay. That shouldn't be hard.
Okay. Yeah, so sticking these things in as you go through and figuring out what is it that we need still, how are we gonna organize the sections that I haven't done, or reorganize what I have done, because I'm not claiming this to be the best way to do all of this. I just took the stuff that was in there before and kind of put it together so we didn't have redundancies and fleshed out some other things. Okay, so we've got our introduction, a tiny thing about what is climate change and that it is human caused and that it is urgent and blah, blah, blah. And it's rapidly changing. And then.
Impacts.
Yeah, specific impacts. Sorry, we went through that. And then there's kind of these little historical things that are out there that Lake Forest Park has done. So we've got a few of the things that Lake Forest Park has ratified or whatever in the past. And then we've got some actions that Corey fleshed out that have already been implemented in the municipal codes or whatever, the guidelines of the city. So again, sometimes this content can fit into several different places, like this could fit here. It also, I was thinking that we would have a like 6 sections of the kinds of strategies we are going to use. So they would be transportation, the built environment. They would be, preserving our ecosystems, external environment, actually. So, transportation, built environment, consumption and solid waste, our natural environment and community resilience. And then I also was considering municipal operations as being our guidelines that would go first for municipal, like what should the city be doing? And have that be the example using things that the city is or will be doing to kind of set up the organization for each of these other sections and show that the city is going to support these other actions. So that was kind of my overall thoughts on organization, and it does, mimic that Kenmore organization too. They've got 5 things and that's 6, the way that I've organized it. So, like
So
I
are
said,
you thinking that you'd say, I didn't exactly understand what you said. So you'd say, here's the municipal operations. And so we're saying, what can the city do? And then you're saying, what can the city do in transportation, built environment? Or
yeah, so we could break it up that way. That'd be a good way to do it. And then we would have those same 5 things under the city operator, city strategies. And then we would have like a larger community strategies with those 5 topics. Okay, that's a good way to split it up.
I didn't understand how it was going to be an example.
Well, I think it's important to have like not just shove all this stuff out into the control. Like everybody's got to do all this stuff. You got to reduce your transportation and you got to fix your home and all this stuff. So I think by showing first that where you're writing this for the city to know what these things are that the city can do, and the city is going to do this, and they have agreed to do this with their climate action proposal. But then they're also going to be supporting these other things for the community on a greater level to also accomplish. And so that's sort of what I'm saying. Example, it's just, showing leadership first on this and then.
Okay.
Tamara has a question. Good.
Yeah, so I know we don't have like a large commercial area, but are we going to put in the commercial as well to like, break it out to like municipal, residential and commercial?
Good thought. Yeah, and I do have in here, yeah, so I think that's gonna come in enough. So I think what we need here then is for strategies and actions, we should have municipal operations, which would be the city government. That would be 1. And then we could have a section on, what would you call that?
Like commercial?
And then these other things would go with it.
And then there's residential, right?
Mhm.
Categories.
Build.
Yeah, that restructures things quite a bit, but you could see then that it becomes you could see that as a grid, yes, well, commercial, residential, and then transportation.
Right, those, yeah, I don't know how much how much we can suggest for, well, I guess we would just be saying the same thing kind of over again for business.
Sure, that's better than just having transportation than having a municipal, commercial and residential. underneath that.
No, I don't think that's better. So, yeah,
Well,
that's
give it
another
another
way to do
option.
it, yeah, yeah, right, rather than.
Yeah. And then if something isn't that, there is much for commercial in one category, it doesn't matter, it's all the rest of it.
So.
Yeah, so we can easily restructure that,
Is that like 3 sections in each?
3 sections. would work.
So 3 sections under each, so transportation would have 3 sections.
So there will be 5 big sections: transportation, buildings, environment, consumption, and resilience. And then within each one of those, we would have the 3 or like all. Yeah, depending on what we need for each of those sections. Yeah, I think we discussed that.
Okay.
So I can go through and change that. But change the structure. But in this part, I have not moved ahead super much with what is. We had this whole, round robin of people reading through the parts of others. And so I think there were some comments that were put in there. I think these sections still need to be smoothed out, and I think we might want to think also about how we're gonna list out those actions.
And what is this part called of this, of the organization?
Strategies and actions.
Strategies and actions. So what we're saying is under the strategies and actions, we want to get more, what do we want? What are we doing? We're smoothing them out, we're. figuring out
Yeah, so
format.
each of those 5 they do have this structure that we have also put in with, what is the action, what are the challenges, and what are the solutions for each one of those, so we've got that as well. But it might be worth people taking a look through that Kenmore plan and seeing if there's a way to streamline this all down into easier to read, rather than having all this text in all of these categories.
All right, I don't know if this is relevant, but first of all, thanks for doing that. That's so much. Okay, that was great. Secondly, I applied for the Climate Action Plan Manager position at Kenmore. And of course, I used their plan to prep for their interview.
Okay.
And oh my goodness, was it easy to isolate, say, 3 low-hanging fruit, because one of the questions I knew was probably going to be something effective. What are your first 3 actions, 3 months into the job or whatever, right? It made it so easy to answer that question. So my point is that, at least from our point of view of if we want to have somebody, a municipal employee do these things, trying to make that as easy as possible is
Yeah.
really job 1, right?
Yeah, we've got a lot of text in
Yeah.
here that is important, but I think getting the idea across quickly and easily without bogging people down is
Right.
more.
So is your sense that we have more work to do, or is your sense that now we say we have this and we need to find this technical writer that is graphic?
Maybe a little more to do
Okay.
before getting somebody in here. But it may be worth like looking around to see, well, what are our options for that? Can we use somebody like Cascadia and say, okay, well, we've done all of this part, can you take over it now? Or they're gonna just say, yeah, I don't wanna do that, and we don't do it that way. So it might take some work to find somebody who's willing to take what we have and go forward with it.
Okay, so, but let me just circle back, but you're saying we still have some more work to do. How do we get to that work? You're saying, as I understand it, you said in each of the 5 areas, we have a basic structure, which is the challenges, actions, and
Yeah, well, we might want to think through, I think some work that would be really good is that if everybody takes a look at, if we want to use something like the Kenmore Climate Action Plan as a guidance for this, which I think is a good way to do it. Is to, because we're not hiring somebody to do this all for us, but we're taking organizational strategies from other places and using that is going to save us a lot of time and energy.
So can we have, if we decided we wanted to have a writing session, what is our special meeting? That,
For more than 5.
yes, well, we'd invite everybody and maybe 5 people.
I mean, if more than 5 come, then we have
Depends on the- Okay,
I mean, it's not terrible, right? Because it puts in the public eye that we're doing this work right now. This is the making the sausage bit, right? Yeah, so-
Yeah, and we did do that for when we were analyzing the results of the survey.
Mhm.
Oh, we had some volunteers,
Yeah.
but we invited them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's from
All the before.
Mara. You have your hand up?
Yeah, so I was gonna, when you're talking about the, like having someone do like graphic design. So the person who I had approached to kind of look at it from an equity lens has a former student who is a graphic designer. And so she, I finally did hear back from her and she's going to send me a proposal and include, it would be for both of them. So it'd be for her former student to look at it from a graphic design perspective, and then for her to look at it from an equity perspective also.
I think that's good.
Mhm.
Before we get to them, though, I think we want to maybe also have a person who is more of a plan writer, like a consultant of some sort, to go through the content so that we're.
well, Corey, can you check with Cascadia and see, tell them what we have? Whose job is it to call Cascadia and tell them?
Yeah, I will. I'll
I mean,
reach out to them.
I could do that if you wanted me to, but it seems like they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, I'll reach out to them.
okay, so we'll have that as well.
So I think the more organized we have it here, so that it's easy to read for them, the less work it would be from there. And we can do that kind of organization. What we really need is the expertise of somebody who knows, what's relevant, and what's a good way to get this.
Absolutely.
I worry about the cost.
Yeah.
It's probably above our budget.
Well, we need to know that.
Yeah.
Just to have them look.
I mean, yeah.
The problem is that you're gonna hire a team. You won't be, we'll pick off the one person who can help us with this right there.
So we can't hire one person to do it. If we put together all of this stuff.
It would be difficult. Yeah. I mean, it's almost like we need a freelancer who does this sort of thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Does anybody have?
Yeah.
My daughter's friend is now doing, or she was an engineer. They're both engineers at UW, and they graduated, and she worked for Microsoft for a while, got laid off. And then got this new job doing climate action plans, like in various places for cities.
Oh.
For city, right, so I think that's what it's for. So I would try to find her and see if she's willing to do something outside of her job. She lives here, and she's lived here more. I'll have to see then we get into like insurance and business license. Where she volunteered her time. Well, yeah.
That's
Volunteer.
right.
Volunteer.
She could put her on the climate action committee.
What I
She's
would
a
ask her
student.
to do is to just take, she's not a student, she could, is to take a look. And tell us, you just give us some feedback, not do anything, but just if she would take a look and tell us. Where we needed to, where in her mind, where we would need to go. She's not an expert on this, to me, she's just learning, she's been doing it for a couple of months. But she has been trained,
And she's probably looked at.
and so she's been doing it, so I can start a conversation with her.
I think that's a good first pass and see. And then she's like,
Okay, yeah. So we're gonna look at a couple of places. Tamara's gonna get this proposal back. We're gonna look and see if from Cascadia. and you talk to the student, I think that would give us some options too. I think that'd be helpful. What I'm still not, what I can't figure out is we've got these sections. How do we build one as a model and then let other people build up that same model? Do we, how do we take this team of people and take that next step? Or do we just say, well, Dana, you've done such a good job so far, won't take this next part?
I mean, it's really at this step and with my level of expertise, I can easily go through and clean things up and reorganize, but I don't know that I'm doing it in a way that it's, but I'm happy to do that. But I think a lot of the content that's in here is too much for our proposals.
Too much. Okay.
Well, there's just stuff in there that is not in these other more streamlined proposals, and I think they would bog people down in
Okay.
the format that it's in now, and maybe with the huge amount of content that's there now. Because we need to kind of pick and choose. But organizing the content that's there is a good thing, because then it's easier for us to go through and pick and choose this stuff.
Yeah.
Very much, yeah. So would this be a good time to queue up the Kenmore plan? Just to get an idea of what.
I think that's a good idea, and then maybe you have ideas for looking at that.
Before, so I just think that there may be some ways to be more general in some of these things that are very specific that.
So I have the Kenmore plan open right now. I was just looking at it. Can I share the screen with you guys, or is that what you want?
Sure. Should I unshare?
I
No,
think he'll just take.
he'll just take a.
Or
Are you
it's saying you
going-
cannot start the screen share while someone else is sharing.
You're right.
It's not.
So it looks like, so the way they do it, I mean, it's pretty cool the way they do this. They've got, can everybody see my screen, by the way? Is this all right?
Yeah.
So they kind of broke up like we did, they got the introduction, baseline analysis, strategies and actions. You can see they've got the municipal operations, buildings, blah, blah, blah. So they didn't break it up into commercial. At least I don't see how they did that. Maybe they did within each section, but I just haven't seen that yet. But that, it's not a bad idea to try and break it up with residential, commercial, and municipal. And there's their glossary. Introduction, why a climate action plan. This is all good stuff that we did. And this is their synergies with other city plans. So it just shows that kind of how they break it down. And the cool thing is they now change this to color coded, right? They color code the different.
Why not do that page?
Because it's too hard. I mean, it's just, are you, I can't see those.
So this just tells them this
It
is
takes somebody who knows the codes and the
Well, they'd have to know the comprehensive plan, the water plan,
right. But knowing what those are, I think is important.
Well, at that point, you might just basically shift it over to the staff, much as I hate to put things more on the staff, but basically, since they know their own sections, they're the ones that could basically do that part.
Yeah,
We-
so
we
I
give them a great
threw
list
some
of
of it
Yeah.
today and picked out areas where I thought that there are city stuff that we should know about. But I do think it needs to fit in with the city, not just be another document that's kind of like not connected.
I get it. I get what you're saying. I absolutely do. It's just an enormous task.
Court,
I
I
think-
think it's better to have this be incorporated into the comprehensive plan versus the other way.
What does that mean?
To have the climate action plan be incorporated to the comprehensive plan and not us try to dig through.
Meaning that the comp plan will have a page that looks like this, that will list the climate action plan as one of the rows and where it touches on the comp plan. So the inverse essentially. In other words, put it off on the planning commission.
They know all these things already, right? They know.
Well, and
But then if they're gonna do that, can't we just take it and put it in ours?
we can certainly reciprocate, but the point is that they've got a high powered consultant basically working with them, so.
So, yeah.
So can we? Yeah, why? All right, well, I do think that trying to connect it with other things for the city is gonna be just more productive. So, yeah,
Lot of
this
graph-
page,
This is nice, right?
Yeah.
You see what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
this page is
Community.
like our community survey. It's what this and the next one is what people have said is important.
And again, they keep the color coding, which is cool. So then they basically start, whoops, am I going too fast?
No,
Um, and local impact. So we've all done this. This is all stuff where we can look at our emissions and all that. We've done these sort of things with graphics. There's our graphic things that we could do. So then
Those.
then they go on the strategies and actions. So this is going back to their outline here.
Yeah.
You know, where they, whoops, sorry, this outline here, strategies and actions. So they're going to take each one of these in their own color coded way. And they do this nice little graphic where they essentially go, where are we? Yeah, here we go. Here we go. So municipal operations. So they basically first start off talk about a goal. They highlight the goal and they give you the data.
Municipal operations,
Oh,
we have it for the whole city.
I think we can use the climate action tool for this. Actually not the greenhouse gas inventory for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, so even if we don't have it right now, this is not hard to get.
Okay,
Okay.
In fact, I'll work on it if you want, so.
sure, that'd be great, because I think having that in there for the municipal part of this.
Yeah.
so this, what you're showing is where and when you're talking about this, you're saying in municipal operations, this is where the CO2 is coming from. And
Exactly.
that it's in these basic three areas: buildings, transportation, land use.
Yeah. And then they talk about what are the strategies and actions, and they do this in more of just a straightforward table kind of action. Strategy 1, strategy 2, strategy 3, strategy 4, and this goes back to that table where they have these codes, you know, these 4.2, and they show how these were all related back to this little main table here.
It's simple and nice, but it takes a lot to get it to the simple.
Yeah. And then they'll go on to buildings and energy. Same thing, goal. This is the data. Here's our strategies and actions, and going back again to their coded message. Moving on, transportations and land use. Here's your goal. Here's your data, priorities and things. And then here's your strategy and actions, consumption and materials and management, your goals, nice little graphics. Go back to your table of strategies and actions, natural systems and water.
You can look at them, just one, pick one, the next one there. Go, keep going, one more page. Okay, that's it. Well, back up, go on to that chart. So can you make that page bigger? So we can actually read it.
Oh, I don't know. Is that bigger?
Yeah. So what they're saying is they have in natural systems and water resources. The N one is
Natural system.
natural systems, and where did these goals come from? That's what I want to know. The conducting,
These are the research that we've done. So this is what we've done already. We've already kind of, at least in my natural system, I've kind of got strategies and things like that. I don't have them in kind of that straight out form like that, but I do talk about, you know, these educational things and things like that. And I think they do this and I can't remember if this was the plan, but there was one of the cities that had a plan about short-term goals versus the more long-term goals. And they might break this up that way by looking at strategy 1 is more the short-term goals. Strategy 2 might be more the medium goals, and strategy 3 might be more of the long-term goals. But I don't know if that's the way they did that.
I guess what I'm having trouble with understanding is what NF1.1 means.
So
Is
those,
it-
no, those are, those are their strategy. That goes back to that table.
They're just numbering them out.
And
So
that's-
we have it as text, but they're simplifying
Yes.
it into.
So I see NS is natural systems and water,
Yeah.
and I think they're referring to that. They created the other parts first, and then they added it.
Yeah.
That's the planning code that goes to utilities and public works. So that's how they've.
That's my question. Is it all related to code?
No,
No,
No, they're just,
Okay.
it's their own numbering system, but then they relate the
I mean,
numbers.
for
to
instance,
the-
NS 1.1 simply means natural systems, is being they said, strategy one, first thing.
Okay.
Right, that's all it does.
So could we take what we have and use that sort of chart format? Would
Yeah.
that be a way of proceeding?
Yeah, because we have all this content, but it's just kind of garbled up in those 5 or 6 sections.
Right, I mean, we kind of do it under our number 2 commercial, we have goals, and then we have literally somebody who wrote this, thank you, by the way, strategies. 1, increase the transition to EVs, right? So that would be our commercial or C 1.1, right, or something like that, you know, and it's, you know, I think we just have it here, it's just hidden.
I didn't get to that part of the organization. But I don't think it's super hard. It's just a matter of organizing these things. The part that's hard is knowing like what content, what we really should have in there, and that's where an expert.
Brian, can you continue going down? There's one table that I refer to all the time while I was prepping, and it's the one that has dollar signs and I believe check marks.
I think though that you're worried that we won't have what we need to have.
oh, here's where they do their timeline and sequencing.
Well, no. We can
And
see
then
it.
you're right, then there's one that has costs.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was looking at somebody else.
So
It's
this
Yeah.
is,
Well, I think that's not.
This is like a restaurant. This is like a restaurant code where they tell you how much your meal is gonna be.
Okay. Sorry.
I mean, this one I appreciated the most because you notice it's got the dollar signs for cost of the city, low cost, moderate cost, high cost. It's got basically the potential for this to reduce emissions with basically those little, I think, rain clouds, right? Okay, low, moderate, and high. And then the nice thing is the timeline. Is it easy or is it hard? Right?
That's- Yeah. That's kind of what Brian
Yeah.
was suggesting.
Yeah, so I think having this kind of summary table would be great for us because, you know, as I say, not only will it help somebody who prospectively applies for a position, but it also will help anybody reading and saying, okay, well, and it's our benchmark, right? Why is the city doing this if this was so easy and this was so low cost, right? Yeah.
I agree. I think this is like the meat of the plan right here.
It's the way it's ensuring. that everything is very fast.
Okay. But does this come last? I mean, I'm trying to figure out what the steps are. So this is what I'm hearing, is that it's possible that we could go back a number of, several of us worked on one section. So like Ann and I worked on transportation. Should we take that back and try and put it into that chart form?
Or go back and like make something like this, because we don't really have this. content. So like, how expensive is it to do these things? And how-
Exactly. I was just gonna say that there's some vagueness to this. How did they designate low cost? What was the dollar value for low cost? What was the dollar value for moderate? Because that's gonna change with us because we're not as wealthy as Kenmore, right? It's gonna be completely different.
Yeah, is there some kind of like glossary for this? Because I feel like, yeah, there definitely should be. Like, what is like for long-term and midterm, like what does each clock should represent a time frame? Like each dollar
Right. Yeah.
chunk should represent an amount.
Well, here's the
Okay,
and let's
So
see if they have funding. Do they have something for funding? I don't see anything for funding.
yeah. And then for like emissions reduction potential, like that should be quantified also.
Yeah,
Well, there's a reason that they've left it vague, most likely.
You can't.
And I would also note that when they are using the phrase cost to city, I don't know if they're using city to mean the municipal entity that is the city of Lake Forest Park government that distributes funds raised by taxes, or whether it means city as the residents who will pay out of pocket for certain things. Because if I'm looking at something like retrofitting buildings, the cost to the municipality itself, that is the government entity, is probably going to be pretty low, but the cost to each individual homeowner is going to be somewhere between 0 and very high. So I think the reason that these are vague and not well defined and very generalized is because the concepts themselves are amorphous and they shift depending on the perception of the observer. It's Schrodinger's
Right.
cost analysis.
No, I think that makes sense. But the
Okay.
CO2 one should be, you would have thought the CO2 would have been more quantified though, right? And I mean, you can't just say, hey, let's put 1 cloud here and 2 clouds there.
Actually, you can. That's very, I hate to say it, but that does happen. It's probably more quantified because it's probably guts. But if you don't find a table in the appendix somewhere, then I would argue that it's how many clouds do you think it should be? Let's take a group vote and agree.
So we can do that.
I'm sorry. It's
But no,
it may be derived from the emission reduction potential that is provided by the county agencies too.
Sorry, I hope I'm not making anybody sick. I'm just trying to figure out if they've got something here at the end that does this.
probably just a look good chart.
Oh, it may be, it may go back to their initial emissions data, right?
Yeah, well, actually, it doesn't even do that, because you'll notice some things like you electrify the city fleet, get 2 rain clouds, and it's like, no, you have like 10 cars. It's really not going to cut city emissions that much. So, so when I was looking at that table, I had to take it kind of with a grain of salt, just because what Ann said, it's hard to tell, is cost to city municipal or cost to city community? It's hard to say.
But maybe they're basing it on these percentages, right? Like if for instance, they're saying 60% of our emissions is from buildings, and if we start working on those buildings and change them, we can have a greater reduction.
Yeah, and certainly some of them do. I mean, yeah, absolutely. But like I said, basically, some of them were very city specific, and the city is a very tiny set of operations compared to the community itself. So that's why I had to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt.
I mean, I think we can use this, but just do it better. I mean, I think we can do it better. I think to your point, we can break it up and do it, for municipal buildings and, residential buildings. And, we could do it better. Like all of these, questions and that we have with their plan, inconsistencies or whatever, we can just do it better.
We could also prioritize, because now there's funding that may be coming in through the, the federal incentive plan and stuff. So that could be a way to prioritize spending too, is where there's money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, have another category for like rebate opportunities, right?
Which sounds like it was something in the survey that people wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna ask this question again. How do we get here?
I think we need a professional. Sorry, I do. I think this is kind of we all have jobs, we all have daytime stuff. I don't know if we can really spend the hours it's going to take, the days to take to try and organize. I don't know. I'm tired. Bad question for me at this time.
Volunteers, and we don't have.
But at least we could basically get all the sections to have the strategies, right?
I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I
We can do
think
that.
that's too.
So
Yeah,
go back to
I agree.
So that page where it has a strategy and the action, that page, the M1 page.
Oh, is this, sorry, is it this page?
We can do that. That's what
Yeah.
we can.
Oh, no, you mean this page up here?
No.
No,
the one
no,
we
no.
have.
When you were at-
I'm sorry.
M1,
Just
yeah,
for-
right there.
Just for them, okay.
So we have these categories as transportation, buildings, consumption, resiliency, and something else. Natural resources.
And I think it makes sense to leave municipal wrapped in to that because it's a subset.
And it's a tiny,
It's really tiny compared to what, our actual residents have to do some lifting here.
Say that again, Ian. You don't think we should have a strategy like this?
Oh, I think we should have a strategy like this, but instead of breaking out municipal operations as an area, I would fold that into the areas that we've already defined, such as transportation, because municipal operations is one aspect of transportation, but it's tiny compared to all the other cars in Lake Forest Park.
Got it. So this is, I'm gonna run this up the flagpole, see who salutes it. That would be, we worked in groups on sections. What if we stayed with those same sections? And took what we did and got them into this format. Does that make sense?
yes,
So I don't know. Ann and I were on transportation. Who was on buildings?
so I'm trying to remember, I'm trying to look at it, see if I can remember what I only knew it in the other. one. I switched out all the.
Minutes. Okay.
Here the,
And we also need to talk to folks who aren't here, right, to catch them up on this. So if we got that far, how helpful would that be? Then what do we do?
That's
that?
the important part
Okay.
anyways, like, some of the other stuff is just for look.
Blah, blah, blah.
Like, it's, and we could hand it to the city council and say, these are the things that could be added. But it would take a lot of time, more time than we have, but here's examples of what a professional would add,
Okay,
but you got us.
right.
Unless you're willing to give it.
Yeah,
But it's like, that is the important part of a plan action, yeah.
but
Well, yeah, but you do want to make it like digestible.
And
so what I'm hearing is that two things are going on at the same time. One is we're gonna, if people are okay with going back and taking the section they worked on before. And sort of work that out into a format like the one from Kenmore. And at the same time, we're gonna look at whether there are consultant helps, and we're gonna look at whether Cascadia consulting could do it, whether the woman that Tamara's been talking, and Mimi's. So we look at those as terms of doing that. It would be really, okay, I'm rushing ahead now, because I think if we had those grids at the picnic in the park on pieces of paper, we would have something to talk about with the public, even though we don't have a report yet, but I'm clearly working on the report yet. But we would have to say, this is what we're thinking, that the strategies around transportation are this and this, and we could get feedback too. Does that make sense? I'm trying to sort of leap ahead to that piece where we've said we're gonna be out in public.
I wonder if someone can create some sort of like a template chart. So everyone can just start implementing their sections, so it's all the same format.
Well, it looks like just a chart. I could do that, right? It's just a chart.
Yeah.
right?
well,
Parts
if
of
we,
They're
yeah,
basic.
if we want to do something like this, where we have, yeah, or not that, sorry, like if we had, too many pages, like this, like municipal operation, you mean that kind of, this kind of chart here? Is that what you're?
And I don't understand, I feel like the stupidest person in the room. I have no understanding of these numberings yet, but I'm sure that I can
It's
figure
just
it.
there.
So
Just make it
every municipal celebration.
Okay.
1.1 is the first one. It could have just said one.
Just a number.
They're just made up.
Okay, they're just-
Have to
okay.
do it that way.
Strategy one, first one.
Okay,
Strategy
so
one.
I would make a chart like this and
For
send it
each
out
of
to
them,
people
yeah.
and we can use it. And I'll send that out to you Thursday, so you have it on Thursday. It's easy, right?
Yeah.
And then if we put it on, if we put the,
We could do it on Google Sheets.
There's-
no.
Well, I can do it if you want. 'Cause
Okay,
that way everybody can edit it there. And then we'll have.
I like that. I like that
Yeah.
idea, Dana. Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks, Dana. That sounds great.
I'll do it. So can you do that by Thursday?
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, The bad news is then it doesn't actually have who's gonna do what.
We have it in a former version.
Yeah. the
Yeah,
name
so we're
for
gonna
it.
have to find that, yeah.
Oh, it's,
Yeah, it's on the computer.
Yeah,
All right, I don't have it.
this is your computer.
Oh. I'll walk off with yours.
I say
really.
Okay, so, this is, my feeling is that this is
Why not?
moving us in pretty significant directions, that this format will, we could even, that positions us to do something in the public for picnic in the park. So what month is this? This is July. If we could have these done by August and have a chance to look at them in August, the sooner you got them, the better.
I don't think it's gonna take too long. It's a matter of just squishing down what we
Yeah.
have that's written out in one.
Okay, okay, so. So I need to call the folks who aren't here. Right, tell them what their assignment is. Okay. And you're gonna do the graph, the whatever it is on sheets.
The grid.
Are we gonna be able to find that? I mean, people don't.
I'll send you, and you can send it out, or I'll send it to Corey.
Okay, send it to Corinne. Or you can send it to Jen. Okay. All right,
We're still doing the writing session? Or is this now individual, everybody just throw it out of the
But-
grid?
Well, maybe if we can get this all done like sooner rather than later, which are not later.
right,
But how
It would be-
hard or easy it is.
yeah, you know, you all know that I'm gonna be sort of a nurse in a while, in 2 weeks. So I'm gonna have some harder time. Well, maybe I'll just have all the time in the world. Anyway, I want to have brain space. I want to have much brain space. So if we could get it done earlier, that would be better. And then we know where we were. And then we could, you think we could have another meeting where we just touched base in 2 weeks?
well, our next meeting is August 1st.
It's 3 weeks.
It's 3 weeks. Because we pushed this meeting up.
Oh,
so
right,
we're meeting
Fourth of
in
July.
And picnic in the park is on,
September.
oh my gosh.
That are
Uh,
separate.
What?
So
We
the
can wait till,
discussed is that Sarah spent money to purchase entertainment for our breakout,
Well, let's,
that we can maybe pass the pot to help fund that.
yeah, but yes,
Does
Or we
everyone
could
know
just-
about that? Yeah,
buy cookies. Have food at our table and make people come to it.
yeah,
Oh,
we can do
yeah.
that, but you still have this
Yes,
big
and
payout.
yes, well, and their band is arranged, right? Did you make arrangements? with them?
Not yet.
Oh, so is that for the picnic in the park? It's
Yeah.
not a separate, oh,
Yeah.
Or, I don't know, yeah, maybe trying to do that, or the pep parade.
No.
Parade.
Well,
we can't do both,
not with the band.
have the band walk the pet.
Yeah, or walking the vet for, anyway, we'll all figure that out. But we do want to have the, we want to create some eventfulness at Picnic in the Park about our plan. At the same time, we want to continue to do some outreach, so this, so I just want to say, I'm very excited about working with Kenmore and Shoreline on this, on these 3 events. There are new people in both those cities, and Corey and I said, well, let's do something easy and fun, and each of us has to do one, and they jumped on it. It's gonna make it, it's good for them, and it's good for us, and it's good for moving the issue. It just turned out to be a nice thing to do, and we're gonna do an evaluation form that we can see if they want to continue kinds of things like this.
I think that's great. And it happened really fast.
It did happen fast. I think that people were eager to do it.
And the poster looks good.
Oh, good. Yes, it does.
Well, Sarah, I'm sorry to say, but the Stewardship Foundation is next Tuesday, so I'm going to be out with that.
How about the 25th or the 1st?
The 25th.
He meant coming to the event.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
Yeah, the 18th, I'm not gonna be able to go to the event.
Okay, well, you got our, so maybe we are at the 1st of August.
No,
Well,
he's
that's
talking
the
about this
18th
event.
for the cook-off.
It overlaps with.
Stewardship.
Can you bring the stewardship?
Bring the
people to
stewardship
event?
people to the event.
I also have a conflict on that night. I will attend the portion that I can, but.
Yeah.
Previous commitment.
Yeah. All right,
So when are you guys coming to council? Okay, it's not gonna be the next couple of sessions then.
I don't think so. I think they got their hands full.
We do have our hands full, but at the same time, you come when you're ready, right? So, and we'll make time, so,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, what if we move our meeting up? So instead of meeting on the 1st of August, we meet on.
25th.
25th.
I have
That's
a part, I have a part for it.
We do it different.
Tamara is good at sending out polls to see if there's a time. Could you, Tamara, are you still here?
Yeah.
Could you send out a poll, seeing if there's a time when people could do a separate meeting, give a couple of date opportunities?
Yeah, do we want to do like same time, 7 to 9?
No, it doesn't have to be. Oh, Ryan's saying yes.
And are there days that we can't have it since it would be a city meeting, like times that,
Oh, it has to be often.
You mean like the week of the 24th, right? Is that what we're looking at, the week of the 24th? And not the 25th, not the Tuesday, the 25th.
You're right.
Are there any other not days?
That's she council.
Okay, Mondays work for people? Okay, well, Tamara's gonna send that out and we'll see if there's a day.
It'd
So-
have to be like Wednesday.
Say what?
It'd have to be Wednesday,
Wednesday the what?
26th.
At night.
Well, if they
I mean,
wanted
if you
to-
wanna do it in the day, you gotta do it at night, like I have a job.
You mean?
What jobs do?
You wanna change seats?
Sure, we can
Computer
push
back.
back yet.
Thank you. Sorry to be so.
No, perfect.
Oh, yeah.
There's a cow
on the Close, yeah, sure.
I would really love to hear to learn how long you guys have absolutely. Thank you. I'm sure my next event may overextend. So.
Are you signed up for our updates and things?
No, I don't think I should.
Maybe, we do have,
You have my card, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so send me and I'll forward it. to them.
yeah.
Yeah, it's on their webpage too.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. We have, Tamara has a report too, from the comms team.
all right, so we have let's see, so we have our Go Electric workshops, farmers market, July 23rd. So I, sent out the poll. So I'm flexible that date, so I haven't signed up yet. If anyone has not signed up yet and they're able to, if you could please, and then I'll take a look at it again. I guess I'll send it out again in maybe another week, see if anyone else might want to sign up. Or if you can't, maybe I'll just ask and then I'll stop bothering people, knowing that whoever has signed up is able to, and then we can just kind of fill it in. For our garden tour event, since we didn't have a lot of people who could do it, we did reach out to our volunteer pool to see if anyone would do it, and we didn't have any takers. Unfortunately. So for something that we did, let me see if I can bring it up and share my screen. For the, I guess I could have had this up before. So let me bring this. We'll come back to this. So we have an LFP in 20 years. It's not like a drawing contest, but what it is we have a place where people can draw and kind of write out what they would see LFP looking like in 20 years from a like sustainability and like climate resilience perspective. And so we created this when we could, the thought being put out to the community, and then we can display it, you know, at different events that we have. So let me bring this up if I could share my screen here. And I'll bring this over. All right, can you guys see it? Let's share your vision and art. If I could make it smaller so you can actually see the whole thing in one screen. There we go. So share your vision and art to support climate resilience in Lake Forest Park. So we have one of our volunteers created this. And then, so this is part, we can edit, submit your art by this date for it to be displayed at the LFP Farmers Market on this date, or, you know, fill in the blank, whatever event we're having here. And then, you know, instructions. In 20 years, what does a sustainable and climate resilient Lake Forest Park community look like to you? Share your vision for how our community can adapt to climate change and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Draw, write, use poetry or mixed media, and we can display it.
Do we need to be able to contact them? Do we need their email address? Is there any reason to contact them?
I don't think so. Unless do you think of any reason why you would want to?
I don't know what we're doing with, if there's,
We don't-
is this just for like community activity, bringing it to the park and stuff?
Yeah, so we just have it displayed at like different community events that we have. So like at the farmers market, you know, we could display it then. So, you know, when we have different events, we can put it out and be like, hey, this one's going to be displayed at, you know, this
We'll
you know,
display
upcoming event.
And then keep them for display in future too, right?
Yeah.
More than once.
Mhm.
What if, I guess I'm just thinking of an incentive, if we did sort of a drawing, a random drawing of anybody who submitted one and give them some like a mug, something, you know, something, I don't know.
These
Gift
are,
card to third place.
yeah, these are children, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can give them
Yeah, well, or adults. I mean, we kind of put it out for all ages. I mean, we could, I guess, limit it to kids if we want to.
But we did ask their age, right?
Yeah, because I thought it's kind of fun to just
The above 60.
people like, yeah, see their ages. Like you could leave it blank.
Yes. I did ask the librarian if they would post them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? Should we have a
So I was wondering, do we
like
need
a
to-
random drawing at some point and have some kind of fun? I mean, it should be, I don't know, right, something related to sustainability and climate resilience, the prize.
I think we've got enough of them to do a drawing. We have to get us going first, but
Yes,
I think that if we did say we're gonna have a drawing sometime in the future and hand out a banana, or, you know, something, I don't know.
From the mayor.
They can come to our meetings, I don't know, what,
I guess we just have to figure out where we would put where people would put it, right? Because if something's gonna be displayed, people wouldn't want their,
they could put on the
Fine.
back of their submission. They could just write it on the back. If they emailed it to us, then we've got it, right? We have it.
Mhm.
They hand it to us on paper, they could write on the back.
Yeah,
their
Okay.
email address.
Do
Yeah.
we want to write on it that we have the permission to show it at other things?
That's
Like-
what I asked Dana about, or Corey
Oh, yeah.
about whether or not we
Oh,
can get
Oh,
parents,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
we
I-
have to
you
have a
do.
disclaimer on there.
It's parents' permission to display
or
it.
what if you are? Or do you just get their
Um,
picture and it
Send me the, like, flyer thing.
and then Mhm.
How to.
Okay. Yeah, it might be an attorney question.
Okay.
Uh,
I know we have obliged to show all of them if there's things on something that. No. we're not. We'll have to have a disclaimer.
We're in charge and you're not. I think that's right.
And then we can, so at the farmer's market, we can highlight the survey results. We kind of use what we did at the, what was it, the Green Fair? And we kind of had the highlight of the survey results. And then I know maybe we had talked about having like a document with like a QR code that we could then like link to it. I'm not
Link to the
quite sure.
survey.
Like for the, yeah, so like like a QR code that we could put on like the poster kind of with more information about the survey, so people could, get more information about the survey results in, a format that's easily readable and digestible.
Okay, well, that's related to what Mimi was
So I'll
gonna do.
follow up on what you just said.
And then picnic in the park on September 9th. So we talked about using this opportunity to introduce our climate action plan. And you have our second farmers market table on October 1st. Something we talked about is making seed bombs. We also talked about having like an event at Third Place Commons sometime in the fall to present the emissions data, climate action plan, maybe do like some small breakout groups for people to talk. And something else that we talked about for the K4C meetings, I'm not sure if it's possible to get like highlights or some kind of summary or just something that we could then like distribute to the community, like, hey, here's what's going on, like not just what we're doing, but here's what the county's doing, at a larger level. And, there'd be some way to learn like how and what other cities are doing to meet the K4C goals.
So this, just so I can be clear, this would be distributed at that Third Place Commons event?
Well, just like in general, just with our like the newsletters that we send out to people, means like we know that K4C exists, but I don't think we really have a lot of information that we can give to the city about what goes on. I mean, they have access to these meetings. I don't know if people have access to the K4C meetings or just kind of on a county level what we're doing.
The planning is being done for a K4C town hall, so the public is invited in the fall. So would that be sufficient, or do you actually want more of a electronic document summary kind of deal?
I think that's.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good. I mean, this doesn't have to be like all the time, just like sporadically, if there's some way,
Okay,
I don't know, throughout the year, if we could get highlights or just something that we could then send out to the city, like via the newsletter.
got it.
Yeah, I think there's some that as we begin to think about what our meetings are gonna look like in the future, it may be that we wanna have a half hour of somebody presenting to us. On some of these issues. I always say the reliability of the grid. I'd love to hear Seattle City Light talk about it. But there might be a series of other things that we could do that were short presentations that the public would be invited to. First part of our meeting as we sort of move forward.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That was what else we talked about. I think it'd be really good to have, yeah, guest speakers that people would in Lake Forest Park would find interesting to hear about that's related to climate action and resilience. Yeah, that's a great idea, Sarah.
And Cameron is looking for a replacement as head of the comms team as well. I sent Matt a note asking him, because he wasn't here, his punishment was to take over the comms.
There's lots of punishment.
I of course haven't heard back from him, but
He's gonna run everywhere.
but if there's somebody who, you've done a great job in terms of bringing us together and holding regular meetings. And I'm disappointed to see that you wanted to leave for that,
The
but
whole full-time job thing, it really gets in the way.
I know. But so if any of you would like to take that on. The job is open. Right, is that right? I don't know how to force people to judge, so think about it, and we'll keep working.
Yeah.
We'll
Well,
see
like
what-
we we're also talking about just like kind of restructuring the subcommittees too, like, when we kind of put them together as far as, the first stage of developing the climate action plan, but maybe we want to restructure them, or now that a lot of it, what we're doing is focused on community outreach, maybe, more of us want to get involved in that piece of it.
Absolutely right, and I think we should take a run at how we want to restructure. But I think we're going to finish this piece, but I'm going to put that down. I want to look at the restructuring of the committee, because I think that's absolutely important as we make the shift to implementation. So. Maybe you have stuff on your.
I just quickly will say something.
Excellent.
The appendix that I'm making for the climate action plan is basically putting all of the results from the survey together. So it's all blotted there. And it could use anybody who feels like looking at it to say, it needs some artistic help, because I don't do that well. But mostly the bigger piece of that is that I'm supposed to make a poster and I'm supposed to create a slide deck for anybody that wants to present this stuff. And I'm kind of interested in anybody who might be thinking of presenting this stuff anywhere or want stuff what is it that you want? What should go on a poster? We had the poster before, but if you looked at the survey results and just gave me your thoughts on what you think would be useful if you were going to give a presentation, what would you want? What in there would you want? So that I know what would be most effective for this group, not just for me, because I can make it for me, but I'd rather make it for us. So I can send a link to Corey and maybe she can send it to everybody. And I'll put those questions there with that.
Okay.
Because I kind of got stuck. I kind of stopped. Like I got the appendix together and I started trying to learn how to make a poster in a good way instead of my ad hoc way. And then I thought I would like some input. So anybody willing to give me some input, I would really appreciate it.
Okay. Are there any other reports from any of the committees that, I do think the committees the comms team obviously has to stay, had been staying through the whole thing. I don't know if the data team or the other team had anything they wanted to report. Okay, so I'm gonna recap what I think we've said. That what we're gonna do, and Tamara's sending out a thing about when we might be able to meet. we're gonna be, whenever that date is, before that, we're gonna meet in the teams that we initially worked on. And we're gonna insert that information into the sheets that Dana's gonna put on the Google Drive. If there's anybody who is my children used to say to me, they couldn't possibly go to school because they had overwhelmatosis. So if any of you have overwhelmatosis and this is not happening and you wanna pass, let us know and we'll sort of reconfigure this. You know, it's better than not having it done, knowing it's not gonna be done, and we'll reconfigure. So. all
Sarah, I
right.
just want to circle back to the poll on when to meet. So I thought we said that the only other day that we could do it would be Wednesday, the 26th.
That's report.
Is that-
Like, that's the only day I can be
Also for me.
at 7 p.m. Oh, we got it. Yeah.
Maybe that I can't, but we'll see. But I can't do around it, but we can certainly get the work done and somebody else can run and can run.
So, oh, you can't be there on that Wednesday, is that the day?
That's the day. I think that's the day he's going to. I can't be sure, but yeah, I don't think that's a good day. But it might be because he's gonna come out and then I can't talk to him. My life is too chaotic to build the schedule
I
around.
don't wanna. Should we just keep it the August 1st date?
No, I think we need it. Well, I don't know.
July 26th is a tough day. There is a standing meeting that a number of folks attend on the fourth Wednesdays at 7 o'clock.
That meeting. if-
That's right. That's
if
it.
possible,
Yeah,
or if necessary.
right. Okay. Yeah. How does that work?
Well, let's get what we need. So we're gonna put this out and get the tables filled
Okay.
in and we'll see what it looks like.
Okay.
And it's, maybe they'll be so great that that'll be the end of our climate action.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna get that done and we're gonna try and move faster rather than meet like usually where we meet to the deadline. We're gonna try and pretend we have an earlier deadline. At the same time, we're gonna look and see what kind of consultants might be available for us to move this puppy forward. And
Well, I do want to emphasize that basically don't reinvent the wheel, right? Look at the Kenmore plan, look at their strategy headings and see if they work, right? I mean, so yeah, you don't have to invent this out of whole cloth.
Yeah, I also, Shoreline has some good stuff
Yeah,
along the
Exactly.
that's what I used when I was doing
Yeah.
that section, so.
yeah, so don't reinvent stuff.
Yeah, there is a lot out there to go to, so like looking at multiple plans.
yes.
You
Spiral
gotta
up.
find the ones that resonate, so a Shoreline I really like, so I just stopped, I
Right.
stuck with that. And then you can decide which ones pertain, so they forest part, yeah.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order?
Are you gonna send us our jobs?
Yes.
Okay. Because,
Yeah.
I'm really bad.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll call you, Ann. She's my team.